Imagine for a second that you possess a website, just a simple domain name.
Right, just a standard URL.
Yeah. But this specific website is so potent, so inherently disruptive that it absolutely terrifies the world's most powerful governments.
Oh, without a doubt.
Imagine a single digital Dropbox that alters a U.S. presidential election, triggers cascading global diplomatic crises, and ultimately results in its founder being targeted by literal CIA assassination plots.
It sounds like a movie script.
It really does. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are incredibly glad you're here with us today because the stack of notes we have in front of us outlines a story that is wilder, darker, and honestly more complex than any spy thriller you could ever pick up.
It truly is. And to really understand the sheer unprecedented scale of this story, we have to look at our source material for today. We are pulling from a massive, incredibly detailed, continuously updated Wikipedia archive, one that documents the entire chaotic history of Wikileaks.
It's a huge document.
Massive. And I want to be clear right from the start, this isn't just some dry timeline of document dumps. What we are looking at is a real-time chronicle of a fundamental structural shift in how power, secrecy, and information operate in our modern digital age.
Exactly. And our mission today is to explore that entire arc. We're going to track the meteoric rise of this platform, the world-shaking leaks that made them a household name almost overnight.
Literally overnight.
Yeah, and the bitter, almost Shakespearean internal mutinies that tore them apart from the inside, plus the intense legal and financial fallout that followed.
There's so much ground to cover.
It really is. This is the definitive story of the most famous and infamous whistleblowing platform of the 21st century. Okay. Let's unpack this.
To really grasp what WikiLeaks became and, why it was so revolutionary, we have to transport ourselves back to its origin.
Right.
The year is 2006. The founder, Julian Assange, along with this really eclectic mixture of international journalists, Chinese dissidents, mathematicians, and hardcore technologists.
A real motley crew.
Exactly. They set out with a goal that was revolutionary, but elegantly simple. They were looking at the history of whistleblowing. Specifically, they were studying people like Daniel Ellsberg.
The Pentagon Papers.
Yes, his famous 1971 release of the Pentagon Papers. And when they looked at that historical model, they saw a massive, dangerous bottleneck.
I was looking through our notes on that Ellsberg comparison earlier, and it really puts things into perspective for you. Back in 1971, if you wanted to expose your government, the friction was just immense.
Unbelievably high.
I mean, Ellsberg had to physically sneak thousands of pages out of a secure facility.
In a briefcase, yeah.
Right. And then he had to stand over a Xerox machine for hours, just standing there, terrified the FBI was going to walk in at any moment and arrest him.
The physical anxiety that is hard to imagine now.
Completely. And then he had to physically hand those heavy boxes of paper over to reporters at the New York Times and just wait for them to decide if they were even going to publish it.
Right, relying on the gatekeepers.
It required massive physical effort, a huge amount of time, and incredible personal risk. Assange's core inspiration was to look at that agonizing process and ask, how can we shorten the time between a leak occurring and the media actually covering it?
How do we bypass the machine?
Exactly. How do we completely remove that physical friction?
And their answer, of course, was the internet. But not just a standard website. They built WikiLeaks to be an uncensorable, cryptographically secure system for untraceable mass document leaking.
It was heavily fortified.
Very. We're talking about utilizing technologies like Tor.
The onion router.
Right, which encrypts traffic and bounces it through multiple global servers to hide a user's identity. They wanted to create a secure digital Dropbox.
A black box for secrets.
Exactly. The idea was that an anonymous source anywhere on Earth could upload classified, censored, or restricted material, and the system would automatically scrub the digital fingerprints, the metadata from those files.
So the whistleblower could never be unmasked.
Never. Assange himself described it as an activist organization where the method is transparency and the ultimate goal is justice.
It's such a utopian vision of the early internet. It's that classic cypherpunk ideal, right? The idea that if you just give people pure, unadulterated information, society will naturally correct its injustices.
Information wants to be free.
Exactly. And looking at the archive, it didn't take long for them to start making massive waves. Even before the massive leaks that everyone remembers from 2010, they were publishing documents that had real-world kinetic consequences.
Very real consequences.
I want to highlight 2007. They exposed a massive corruption scandal involving the family of the former Kenyan leader, Daniel Arap Moi. What exactly happened there?
This is a crucial early example because it highlights the immediate physical impact of digital information. The leak involved a suppressed investigative document known as the Kroll Report,
Okay.
and this report detailed hundreds of millions of dollars being siphoned out of Kenya. According to Assange and the archive, publishing that specific leak directly impacted the Kenya national election. And that is incredibly significant because that election was, unfortunately, marred by severe tragic violence. Over 1,000 people were killed and hundreds of thousands were displaced.
That is heavy.
It is. The information WikiLeaks published wasn't just sitting in an academic vacuum on a server somewhere. It was violently reshaping political realities on the ground in real time.
That immediately sets the stakes for what this platform could do. And around that exact same time, late 2007, they dropped something that really caught the attention of the U.S. government.
Oh, definitely.
They released a copy of the standard operating procedures for Camp Delta. For those listening who might not recognize the name, that was the U.S. Army's official manual for the Guantanamo Bay detention camp.
A highly sensitive document.
Very. I remember reading about this in the notes. The U.S. military had been repeatedly, publicly assuring everyone that the International Committee of the Red Cross had full access to all detainees.
Right. That was the official sanitized narrative they were giving the press.
But the leaked manual explicitly revealed that military personnel were instructed to keep certain prisoners entirely off limits to the Red Cross.
It was written right there in black and white.
It directly contradicted the Pentagon's public denials. And this was the moment WikiLeaks proved their core concept actually worked.
It was a proof of concept on a global stage.
It proved that a highly classified, heavily guarded document could bypass traditional military security, bypass the government press offices, and appear directly before the global public.
But as significant as those early leaks were, looking back now, they were essentially just tremors before the earthquake.
The earthquake being the year 2010.
The year everything changed.
This was the massive explosion that put WikiLeaks on the map globally. And it started in April of that year with something they titled the Collateral Murder video.
Right.
If you are listening to this, you have to try and remember the political context of the time. The war in Iraq was ongoing, and the U.S. military narrative was still very tightly controlled.
Highly curated.
News from the front lines was filtered. And then WikiLeaks releases this classified, decrypted footage from a 2007 Baghdad airstrike.
It was 39 minutes of raw, unvarnished footage, taken directly from the gun camera of a U.S. Apache helicopter.
Hard to watch.
Very hard. The video showed the helicopter crew firing on a group of men in a Baghdad square. Among the dead were several civilians and 2 Iraqi journalists working for Reuters, Namir Noor-el-Din and Saeed Shmah.
And what made the video so incredibly impactful wasn't just the visual reality of the strike, but the audio.
The audio was chilling.
You could hear the casual, almost callous nature of the radio chatter between the crew members as they requested permission to engage and reacted to the killings.
I remember the archive noting the sheer shock of that audio on the public. It completely shattered the sanitized, heavily produced version of the war that the public was used to seeing on the evening news.
It was visceral. And the thing is, they didn't stop to let the world catch its breath. Later that year, they orchestrated something even bigger, Cablegate. They partnered with major traditional legacy media outlets. The Guardian, the New York Times, Der Spiegel in Germany, Le Monde in France. And they released over 250,000 U.S. diplomatic cables.
Just a massive data dump.
250,000 classified documents. Can you break down what a diplomatic cable actually is in this context? Because I think people picture an old-school telegraph machine clicking away.
That's a great point of clarification. In the modern era, a diplomatic cable is essentially a highly secure internal email or text message sent via a classified network, which in this case was the U.S. military's SIPR net.
Okay, so secure emails.
Exactly. These documents contain the unguarded, highly confidential communications between the U.S. State Department in Washington and its embassies and diplomatic missions all over the world.
The private chats of diplomats.
Because the diplomats thought they were writing on a secure, closed system, they were brutally honest. They revealed incredibly candid, sometimes deeply embarrassing assessments of world leaders.
No filter.
None. They contained wrong intelligence on global threats, discussions about United Nations spying, and intense backroom political maneuvering regarding the Middle East.
I saw some of the specific quotes in our research, and they are wild. You have U.S. diplomats describing Vladimir Putin as an alpha dog, calling the German Chancellor Angela Merkel Teflon, and detailing massive corruption in allied nations.
Stuff you never say in public.
Never. Imagine you are listening to this and you're a top-tier diplomat. You go to work one morning, grab your coffee, and suddenly your private, completely unfiltered insults about the foreign head of state you are currently hosting are printed on the front page of every major newspaper on Earth.
The sheer panic and suffocation in diplomatic circles globally must have been unimaginable.
Absolute chaos.
What's fascinating here is how WikiLeaks fundamentally changed the nature of journalism in that exact moment.
How so?
Historically, major news organizations were the ultimate gatekeepers. A newspaper editor would look at a leaked document, call the White House or the Pentagon, and negotiate.
They'd make a deal.
Right. They would decide what the public needed to know and what should remain secret for national security. WikiLeaks completely bypassed all of that.
By acting as that uncensorable drop box.
Exactly. They shifted immense power directly away from those traditional editors and gave it to anonymous whistleblowers. If a news outlet hesitated or didn't want to publish something out of fear of government retaliation, WikiLeaks just hosted it on their own servers anyway.
They effectively forced the hand of the legacy media.
You either report on the documents WikiLeaks is hosting, or you get left behind.
They completely rewrote the rules of the game. They proved the platform was a geopolitical weapon. But, and this is where the story takes a massive, almost ironic turn.
A very dark turn.
Yeah. While Julian Assange was preaching this gospel of ultimate global transparency to the world, internally, his own organization was fracturing. We're moving into this era of mutiny.
It is a classic, deeply human paradox. As the external pressure mounted and the global spotlight became blinding, the internal structure of WikiLeaks began to collapse.
The pressure cooker exploded.
By late 2010, right at the height of their fame, there was a full-blown mutiny. Key members of the core team were increasingly unhappy with Assange's management style, but specifically, they were clashing over how he handled redactions.
Okay, let's define that. Redaction is the process of removing sensitive, identifying information like the names of local informants from documents to protect them from retaliation before publishing, right?
Correct. Because earlier that year, they had published the Afghan war logs, and some staff felt Assange was being incredibly reckless.
Just dumping raw data.
The archive notes that he was accused of not redacting enough material to protect innocent lives on the ground. And this internal dissent led to a massive breaking point with Daniel Domscheit-Berg.
He's a big player.
Very big. He was the German spokesman for WikiLeaks, basically Assange's top lieutenant and public face in Europe. He argued that the organization had developed a structural problem, that Assange was acting like a dictator, and that the finances lacked the very transparency they demanded from others.
The irony.
He said he could no longer take responsibility for the potential human cost.
But Domscheit-Berg didn't just resign, give a polite interview, and walk away. He took drastic, crippling action.
He burned the bridge.
Completely. When he and another key anonymous staff member, known only as the architect, left the organization, they took the cryptographic code for the submission system with them.
Which broke the Dropbox.
But far more significantly than that, Domscheit-Berg copied and then permanently deleted over 3,500 unpublished whistleblower communications from the primary WikiLeaks servers.
It was a massive blow.
When I was reading the source material, this detail absolutely blew my mind. We are talking about an 18-gigabyte collection of unreleased, highly sensitive leaks. And the archive tells us this wasn't just random internet spam. Do you have the list of what was actually in that deleted cache?
I do, and the contents are staggering. The deleted files included the U.S. government's entire no-fly list.
With the whole thing.
It included massive internal leaks regarding Bank of America. It held insider information detailing 20 different neo-Nazi organizations and U.S. intelligence intercept information for over 100 internet companies. All of it permanently wiped from the servers.
It's just gone. Unbelievable. Domscheit-Berg claimed he did this because he no longer trusted Assange's security protocols. He stated he deleted the files permanently to ensure the sources are not compromised by what he viewed as Assange's increasingly erratic handling of data.
Regardless of his stated ethical motives, the operational impact was devastating. It crippled WikiLeaks' ability to accept new submissions for years.
Years.
Think about the profound irony here. The very system designed to protect whistleblowers from the world's most powerful intelligence agencies was ultimately sabotaged and gutted from the inside out by the very technologists who helped build it.
And the irony gets even wilder. Because while all this internal civil war is happening, the organization's leadership is demanding absolute, unquestioning loyalty.
Absolute control.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Critics began pointing out a massive glaring hypocrisy. The source archive explicitly notes that people working for Wikileaks were reportedly required to sign sweeping, incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements.
Yes, these NDAs supposedly covered all conversations, conduct, and material related to the organization. It effectively gave Assange sole dictatorial power over disclosure.
And the reported financial penalty for non-compliance for breaking this NDA was staggering. It was 12 million British pounds.
A mind-boggling sum for an activist group.
12 million pounds. Think about that for a second. You have an organization whose entire public identity, whose fundamental reason for existing on the internet was to force powerful institutions to be completely transparent.
To end all secrecy.
They believed there should be no secrets. Yet they were rabidly, legally protecting their own inner workings and utilizing million-pound corporate legal threats to limit the accountability of their own leadership. You can absolutely see why former supporters in cypherpunk started to feel deeply disillusioned.
It highlights the extreme, almost unbearable tension between their public mission and their operational reality. But even as they were fighting this vicious internal war over ethics and control, the external world was closing in fast.
The walls were shrinking.
The empire, so to speak, was striking back. And the governments of the world realized something important. You don't necessarily have to arrest someone to stop them. You just have to go after their lifeblood.
The money.
You go after their funding.
The banking blockade. I was reading about this, and it feels like a turning point in internet history.
A total paradigm shift.
Following intense public pressure from the U.S. State Department, who were openly characterizing WikiLeaks activities as illegal and dangerous, the world's major financial institutions just cut them off.
Synchronized.
Almost overnight, PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, and Bank of America all suspended WikiLeaks merchant accounts. They essentially made it technologically impossible for the public to donate money to the organization through any normal, accessible channels. I mean, how do private companies just decide to shut someone off like that?
That is exactly why this is such a profound moment in the digital age. It demonstrated the immense, unchecked power of private infrastructure companies to restrict speech and access.
Without a trial.
Notice what didn't happen here. There was no formal court order. There was no legal conviction against WikiLeaks at that time. These private corporations financially choked a media organization through what you might call extra-legal public-private partnerships.
The government hints? The Corporations Act.
The government essentially signaled its displeasure, and the corporate sector fell in line. It showed everyone that if a superpower wants to shut you down on the internet, they don't need to send a SWAT team to seize your servers. They just need to make a few quiet phone calls to the payment processors.
But the internet didn't just take that line down. This is where the hacker collective Anonymous steps into the ring.
Operation Payback.
Right. They launched a series of massive cyber retaliations in defense of WikiLeaks. They used distributed denial of service, or DDoS attacks, against PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa. Can you quickly explain to our listeners what a DDoS attack actually looks like functionally?
The easiest way to imagine a DDoS attack is to picture a physical retail store. Imagine 100,000 people all trying to cram through the front doors of a store at the exact same second, but none of them actually want to buy anything.
They're just blocking the door.
They stand there blocking the entrance. Legitimate customers can't get in, and the store essentially ceases to function.
Okay, I see.
In the digital world, Anonymous hijacked thousands of computers to flood the servers of Visa and MasterCard with so much bogus traffic and automated requests that their systems became completely overwhelmed and crashed.
It was an all-out, decentralized cyber war over the free flow of information and money.
It really was.
And while WikiLeaks officially stated they weren't affiliated with Anonymous and didn't coordinate these attacks, it didn't really matter in the eyes of the public. It highlighted how WikiLeaks had transcended being just a publisher.
They were an icon.
They had become a symbol. They were a lightning rod for anti-establishment, pro-transparency activists globally. But that reputation, that pristine status as an impartial cypherpunk advocate for ultimate truth, was about to be severely tested.
Which brings us to the absolute crucible of the organization's history, the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Yeah. Now, before we dive into this segment, we need to establish some ground rules based on our source archive.
Very important.
We are looking strictly at what the Wikipedia archive documents. We are not here to take any political sides, endorse any specific candidate, or validate the various hacking allegations as absolute, objective truth.
Right. Our goal is simply to unpack the events, the data released, and the controversies exactly as they are recorded in the historical record.
Yeah, that is a very important distinction, and I appreciate you setting that boundary. So, keeping that strictly in mind, what happened in 2016?
Chaos.
Wikileaks stepped directly into the center of one of the most contentious, polarized elections in American history. Over the summer and fall, they released a massive trove of emails from the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. And later, a massive cache of emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, who had fallen victim to a phishing attack.
The release of these emails had massive, immediate political ramifications. The DNC emails, for example, showed internal communications suggesting that the party's national committee, which is fundamentally supposed to remain neutral during a primary race, had effectively acted as an arm of the Clinton campaign.
Right, actively discussing strategies to undercut the insurgent campaign of Bernie Sanders.
Furthermore, the Podesta emails revealed transcripts of Clinton's highly paid private speeches to Wall Street banks, which her campaign had previously refused to release.
The fallout was severe. It ultimately resulted in the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the chairwoman of the DNC, right on the eve of the Democratic convention.
The timing was incredibly disruptive.
The impact on the Clinton campaign's momentum was undeniable. It dominated the news cycle for months, but almost immediately, a massive secondary controversy erupted, not just over the contents of the emails, but over the source of the documents.
The who became as big as the what.
The U.S. intelligence agencies and the Clinton campaign strongly alleged that the emails were not leaked by a traditional internal whistleblower, but were instead stolen by Russian state-sponsored hackers as part of a deliberate, coordinated effort to interfere in the U.S. election.
Here we must note that Julian Assange categorically, repeatedly denied this. He insisted their source was not the Russian government or any state party.
Right.
President Vladimir Putin also publicly denied that Russia was involved in hacking the DNC. But as the dust settled after the election, more information came to light about WikiLeaks' internal operations and private communications during this highly volatile time.
The curtain got pulled back.
And these subsequent revelations painted a very complicated picture regarding the organization's long-standing claims of strict journalistic neutrality.
I have the notes on those internal chats right here. According to the source texts, internal WikiLeaks communications that were leaked later on showed Assange expressing a clear strategic preference for a GOP victory.
Interesting.
In one specific message, he laid out his political calculus, stating his belief that a Republican administration would face far more pushback and critical scrutiny from the traditional media and the Washington establishment.
A tactical choice.
In contrast, in those same private chats, he explicitly referred to Hillary Clinton as a bright, well-connected, sadistic sociopath.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the revelation of those private political calculations, alongside another major disclosure, was deeply damaging to their reputation.
Definitely.
The archive also details that during the campaign, the WikiLeaks Twitter account was secretly corresponding via direct messages with Donald Trump Jr.
Just slipping into the DMs.
In those DMs, WikiLeaks was suggesting campaign strategies, asking for Trump's tax returns so WikiLeaks could publish them to appear more impartial, and coordinating public messaging regarding the Podesta leaks.
When you read those DMs, it feels like a monumental shift, and the backlash from former allies was intense. I want to point to the journalist Barrett Brown.
A major figure in that world.
If you follow this space, you know Brown was a longtime, staunch, incredibly vocal defender of WikiLeaks. He even went to prison for his journalistic activities adjacent to the hacker collective Anonymous.
He had real credibility with that crowd.
But when these DMs came to light, the archive notes he was absolutely exasperated. He heavily criticized Assange, pointing out the massive hypocrisy of WikiLeaks complaining publicly about being smeared as a pro-Trump outfit while secretly acting as a political consultant for Donald Trump Jr. in private.
It ruined the illusion of impartiality.
Brown argued that Assange had fundamentally transitioned from exposing government wrongdoing to acting as a covert, partisan political operative.
It is a stark, fascinating reminder of the immense difficulty of maintaining true neutrality when you possess information that can literally tip the scales of global power.
It's too much power for one group.
The 2016 election fundamentally altered WikiLeaks' legacy. It alienated a massive portion of their original left-leaning cypherpunk support base while simultaneously attracting a completely new set of political allies who had previously called for Assange's execution back in 2010.
The political whiplash is crazy.
But even amidst this swirling, toxic political controversy, Wikileaks was preparing for another massive collision with the U.S. intelligence apparatus.
Yes, and this brings us out of the election and into 2017 with a release code named Vault 7.
The big one.
This is a pivot back to their roots, but on steroids. If 2010 was the year they exposed the military and the diplomats, 2017 was the year they went directly after the spies.
Right at the heart of the CIA.
Vault 7 was an unprecedented, massive leak of the CIA's internal documentation detailing their highly classified global hacking arsenal.
The capabilities revealed in Vault 7 were exactly the kind of thing that triggers deep public paranoia. It wasn't just abstract code on a screen. The documents detail how the CIA had developed zero-day exploits, malware, viruses, and remote control systems that could compromise everyday consumer electronics.
The stuff in our homes.
We're talking about specific tools with names like Weeping Angel, which was co-developed with British intelligence.
Weeping Angel.
Weeping Angel gave the CIA the ability to hack into smart TVs, specifically Samsung models, make it appear as though the TV was turned off, and then use the television's built-in microphone as a covert listening device in a person's living room.
That is just deeply unsettling.
The leak also detailed capabilities to take control of modern car computer systems and bypass encryption on everyday web browsers and operating systems.
Imagine you're sitting on your couch, your TV is off, and you realize it might be recording everything you say. It's terrifying. It was a direct, devastating blow to the CIA's cyber warfare capabilities because it essentially handed the blueprints of their most expensive digital weapons over to the public.
And by extension, foreign adversaries.
Right. And the agency's reaction was absolutely furious. They didn't just issue a standard press release complaining about the leak. They fundamentally legally changed how they categorized WikiLeaks.
A huge legal shift.
Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director at the time, gave a speech where he officially designated WikiLeaks as a non-state hostile intelligence service.
We have to pause on that phrase because that specific terminology is legally and operationally profound.
Breaking it down, what does that actually mean for them?
By labeling them a hostile intelligence service, the CIA was essentially arguing that WikiLeaks was no longer protected by the First Amendment as a journalistic enterprise or a media publisher.
They stripped their media shield.
Instead, the government was declaring that WikiLeaks should be treated with the same aggressive, covert tactics used against an enemy spy agency like Russia's FSB or China's MSS. And with that new designation came shockingly aggressive covert proposals.
This is undoubtedly one of the most chilling details in the entire archive. Following the Vault 7 leaks, while Julian Assange was living under political asylum inside the tiny Ecuadorian embassy in London, the CIA actually discussed plans to kidnap or even assassinate him.
It sounds like a Bourne Identity plot.
They also drew up operational plans to spy on various associates of WikiLeaks across Europe, sow discord among its members, and covertly steal their electronic devices.
It completely reveals the absolute extreme stakes of this information war. You have a digital publisher locked inside a diplomatic embassy in the middle of London, and a global superpower holding internal meetings discussing extrajudicial kidnapping or assassination on British soil.
It's intense.
But alongside the sheer government fury, the Vault 7 era also reignited intense, foundational ethical debates about WikiLeaks' core philosophy regarding unredacted files.
Right. This brings us back to the idea of failing to curate content. We talked earlier about Dom Scheitberg leaving over redactions. By this point, a lot of transparency advocates, people who genuinely believe in the mission of whistleblowing and holding governments accountable, started heavily criticizing WikiLeaks for dumping raw, unredacted data.
It was becoming a huge liability.
They argued this practice routinely violated personal privacy or put innocent people in severe, immediate physical danger.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most important question of the digital age. What is the fundamental responsibility of a publisher?
Is there one?
Is it enough to simply release the raw truth, no matter the collateral damage, and let the chips fall where they may? Or do you have a moral obligation to protect the innocent people caught in the crossfire of the data?
A heavy burden.
We saw this ethical dilemma explode into a worst-case scenario with what became known within the community as the password disaster regarding those original 2010 diplomatic cables.
Oh, this story is just incredibly tragic and bizarre. It sounds like something out of a bad movie, but it actually happened.
It's a cautionary tale.
So let me break this down based on the archive. Back during the original Cablegate release in 2010, WikiLeaks distributed a massive encrypted file online as insurance. It was heavily encrypted, so nobody could read it.
A dead man's switch.
Right. Later, a Guardian journalist named David Lee published a book called Wikileaks, Inside Julian Assange's War on Secrecy. In that physical printed book, he published the encryption key for those cables.
Just printed the password in a book.
He claimed he did this because he believed it was a temporary password that would expire or become useless, but it didn't.
Exactly. The encryption used was symmetric, meaning the password is the only thing needed to unlock the file permanently. The password was a collection of history since 1966.
Such a specific phrase.
Because Lee published that exact passphrase in a widely distributed book, the entire, completely unredacted cache of hundreds of thousands of diplomatic cables eventually leaked online. WikiLeaks completely lost control of their own data.
The genie was out of the bottle.
And this unredacted file was devastating. It contained the real, unshielded names of local informants, sensitive personal data, private medical information, and even intimate details of people's suicide attempts.
It's heartbreaking.
It was the ultimate ethical failure for a whistleblowing platform, exposing vulnerable individuals who had spoken to U.S. diplomats in strict confidence, often in very dangerous countries.
Put yourself in the shoes of one of those local informants. You risk your life to tell an embassy about corruption in your town, and suddenly your name is floating around the internet for local warlords to find. It's horrible.
It ruins lives.
And importantly, it gave the U.S. government massive, undeniable ammunition. When they eventually formulated their extradition requests, they heavily cited the fact that WikiLeaks' practice of releasing unredacted files unequivocally put innocent lives at risk.
It was a perfect legal argument for them.
Which brings us to the final act of our timeline, bringing the story right up to 2024. After spending 7 years crammed inside the Ecuadorian embassy and then another 5 years in a high-security British prison in Belmarsh fighting extradition, the massive legal walls finally closed in on Julian Assange.
He was indicted on 18 charges, primarily under the Espionage Act by the U.S. Justice Department. The legal battle was protracted, incredibly grueling, and took a severe toll on his physical and mental health.
It dragged on for years.
Finally, in June of 2024, the saga reached a sudden conclusion. Assange pled guilty to a single felony count of conspiring to obtain and disclose classified U.S. national defense documents. He entered this plea in a U.S. federal court in Saipan, part of a plea deal in exchange for his immediate freedom and return to Australia.
He walked free. But the platform itself, the digital machine that had caused so much disruption and terrorized superpowers, was already breaking down.
It was failing.
I was looking at the recent status updates in the archive. By late 2022, reports started emerging from researchers that millions of documents had simply vanished from the WikiLeaks website.
Just offline.
The internal search functions were throwing errors. Most crucially, the secure submission page, the very digital Dropbox designed for new whistleblowers, simply wasn't working.
Assange himself admitted to the Council of Europe in 2023 that WikiLeaks was effectively no longer able to publish new material.
The machine finally broke.
He cited a combination of factors: his own prolonged imprisonment, the intense and pervasive U.S. government surveillance of their remaining staff, and the crippling financial restrictions that were severely chilling any potential whistleblowers from coming forward.
The pressure worked.
The infrastructure, both technical and human, had finally succumbed to a decade and a half of relentless multinational pressure.
It is an incredible, almost unbelievable historical arc. We started with this pure cypherpunk utopian ideal, a group of technologists in 2006 who genuinely believed that ultimate, frictionless transparency would automatically lead to global justice.
A very hopeful beginning.
They built an uncensorable Dropbox, bypassed the traditional media gatekeepers, and brought the most powerful military and diplomatic apparatuses in the world to their knees. But over the course of 18 years, they were consumed by their own internal mutinies, crippled by extra-legal financial blockades, embroiled in brutal, toxic political controversies, and finally besieged by legal and covert government action until the platform essentially collapsed into a broken website.
So what does this all mean?
If we step back and look at the enduring legacy of WikiLeaks, it proved unequivocally that in the digital age, a handful of determined activists armed with a server, encryption, and an internet connection can legitimately shake the foundations of global superpowers.
They proved it could be done. They irrevocably changed the mechanics of journalism. The secure Dropbox model they pioneered is now a standard tool used by every major newspaper in the world. But, equally importantly, the Wikileaks story proved that absolute, unfiltered transparency is not a clean, surgical tool.
It's messy.
Very messy. It comes with severe collateral damage and an intense human cost. It showed us that when you bypass all the traditional gatekeepers, you also lose the institutional safeguards. And the resulting fallout from an uncurated data dump can be devastating to innocent people.
It leaves us in a really strange, precarious place because right now, today, WikiLeaks has effectively collapsed under the weight of global government pressure and its own internal flaws. The infrastructure is gone, there is a massive void where they used to be, and I want you, the listener, to think about this as we wrap up.
It's a sobering thought.
If another massive, world-altering injustice is happening right now, a new illegal war, a massive corporate environmental crime, a sprawling surveillance program, and someone wants to expose it tomorrow, who will those whistleblowers turn to?
Where do they go?
The legacy media is still cautious, and the ultimate Dropbox is broken. And after witnessing the total, systematic, multi-decade destruction of WikiLeaks and the immense personal toll on its founder, will anyone out there be brave enough or crazy enough to try and build the next one?